News First, face to face with Lanka.
A very good evening and welcome to this Monday's edition of Face to Face, coming to you live and direct from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. As always, for the Newsfirst team, I'm Ratnayaka. Today is the 1st of April 2024, and on a more light-hearted note, today is April Fools. But residing in a country like Sri Lanka, we are sometimes left to wonder whether April Fools is an annual occurrence or an year-round occurrence. However, to talk about politics, social economic woes and economic issues, we have brought a guest into our studios tonight representing the National People's Power. She is a newcomer to the show, rather. She is attorney Lakmali Hemachandra, representing the National People's Power. Good evening, Lakmali, and welcome
to
the show.
Good evening, Jamal. Thank you for inviting me.
No worries. So, Lakmali, to get the ball rolling on tonight's face-to-face, I want to ask you about female representation in Sri Lanka. And not so long ago, we celebrated International Women's Day. And if my memory serves me correct, the theme for this year's International Women's Day was Invest in Her. And firstly, if you talk about women overall, who make up around 52% of Sri Lanka's population, we see at times women are often marginalized in society and they are robbed or deprived of opportunities for the most part. So against such a backdrop, what is the National People's Power doing to invest in her, so to speak, and to uplift the standards that women of Sri Lanka are currently experiencing, and also to allow women to be brought into positions of power and influence?
As you very correctly said, women getting excluded, especially from decision-making arenas, like the parliament, provincial councils, and so on, has become, I believe it's a fundamental problem in our political system, right? And it has been happening for a really long time.
Right.
So if you look at what NPP or National People's Power is doing these days, one of the major components of NPP's political program is getting more women into politics. And that has been a characteristic campaign throughout the last few months especially, but even before that, I believe it has been one of the main campaigns, something that as NPP we are really committed to, putting women putting women in positions where they can make decisions, and highlighting the fact that women are not just there for, if you look at the political history of Sri Lanka, you can see sometimes women get into power. The first Prime Minister in the whole world, female Prime Minister, is from Sri Lanka. The first female President is from Sri Lanka, not to undermine those victories, but those victories don't translate into general wins for women, right? We don't see women-friendly policies being promulgated. We don't see more women getting into politics because of these victories. So this is, NPP's campaign is not just about highlighting one woman or putting one woman in power. It's about getting more women into power as a voting bloc and also as a social class, right? Women have their own issues. Women have their own perspective on general issues. So putting them into the political conversation where decisions are made is really important.
Right.
So even if you look at NPP, out of the three parliamentarians we have, one is a woman, and a very highlighted woman in political discourse. So I think that has also inspired a lot of women to join politics under the NPP banner. And so like you said, we have a plethora of policies that would benefit women, but I would like to highlight one key component of it. That is the focus that NPP especially pays for unpaid care work. So if you look at what women do, in Sri Lanka we have 30% women's labour force participation, which is considered to be very low. But if you look at the work that women do in supporting the economy, that cannot be limited to the participation in the productive labour force. Women do housework, domestic work, from taking care of children, taking care of elderly. All of this work is performed by women, which is what we call unpaid care work. NPP's policies around women centers around this unpaid care work. How do you promulgate policies? How do you make policies for women and for the economy that recognizes the unrecognized work that women do, which is unpaid care work, right? So that will translate into various positive outcomes for women. In the sense, it can help women to close down the gender pay gap. It can bring more women into the labor force. And it's not just for women. When you bring more women into, this is a huge section of the society that's left out of the productive economic process, right? So when you address, like, for example, having more daycare centers, simple things, which you might think is simple, but when you look at what's happening on the ground,
it has a large ripple effect.
Exactly, right? And largely ignored also. So if you look at what's happening on the ground, you don't find investment. Like you said, invest in her was the theme of this year's Women's Day, but you don't find investments, public investments, especially in areas where it will benefit women. For simple things like childcare centers, right? Kindergartens, early childcare development, childhood development centers. So these are things heavily underfunded in the Sri Lankan budget, if you look at our budget. So investing in these things will improve not just the quality of life of women, but for children and for the labor force in the future as well, right? It will increase the labor force participation of women. It will close down on the gender pay gap. So, and it will have positive outcomes for the entire economy because you're bringing in a population that is left out of the productive economy. This is something that we keep on talking about. I think governments consecutively have talked about these things and created policies sometimes bad for women in the guise of creating good policies.
Right.
But NPP, I feel like, has the heart in the right place, which is recognizing the work that women already do, and putting it in the spotlight and creating policies for women, created by women, hopefully and definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
So you brought up a very important fact in those remarks, Lakmali. You said you must promulgate policies and laws that enable women to contribute to society or the economy in Sri Lanka as a whole.
Yeah.
One way you can do that is to have female policymakers in the apex legislative body in Sri Lanka, which is the Sri Lanka Parliament.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, at present, only 12 out of the 225 legislators are women, which is a very woeful number. So how does the NPP envision, one, to encourage women to join politics, and two, to allow the voters to build up faith to vote in women to the parliament, where they can then be a part of that conversation to form laws and policies that are beneficial to women?
So if you look at the conferences that women's political rallies that NPP has been having for the last few months, we have a women leadership building inside the party.
Right.
So there are women who take the front seat, who do they get on the politics. I think this is the main difference between NPP women and the, I wouldn't want to call it other women, but if you look at the other political parties, the main difference is women are not being ornamental. Women are doing their own campaigns inside the party. They are bringing in more leadership into the party. So they are not just at a level where you bring women to show numbers and you bring women just to,
just to promote the fact that you support gender equality.
Exactly. So this is more, because the real power is in leadership, right? Whatever you say. So it has to be in a position where you can make decisions. So I think the difference that NPP wants to do and is committed to do is putting women in positions where they can make decisions, where they can actually make a change. Parliament is, of course, one of those places. And like I said, they have proven it by putting, like, when you get 3 members in the parliament, I don't think any political party in Sri Lanka would put one woman there.
They've nominated a woman.
Right? They've nominated a woman out of the national list also. So, because they believe it's important, because they're committed to that policy, right? So, definitely, there'll be more women. I mean, that's something that we want to do, put more women in the parliament. And not just a certain social class of women who already have access to privileges and resources to get into power, but women who are from villages, rural areas, working class backgrounds, who don't have the, the leisure time and the privilege and resources to get into power. So NPP wants to become a vehicle for those women to express themselves, to claim their position in power, right? That has been, I think that is well illustrated in the work that NPP has been doing, especially for the last few months. and that I believe will transform into policies that's good for women inherently.
Okay.
Right? If you look at countries around the world where you have women in the leadership, whether it's the president of the country or majority of the parliament or a significant portion of the legislature, you find women controlling power, women having power. It translates into benefits for women and for everybody, I feel, right? It's different. The perspective they bring, the insights they have, and the sort of the approaches they have to everything is different. And we need that. I mean, not because this is not just an argument for equality, but this is also an argument for, just to have different point of views, coming from different backgrounds, coming from different sexes, different genders, right? It's important to have different point of views in the parliament. What we have right now is a very homogeneous, it's the same kind of people, mostly men, mostly from certain, if you look at the power they have, certain families. So this is what we call the elite, the people with the power, the resources, who can get into these positions and make decisions. Women are left out of that, like you said, right? So it is putting women in the leadership would change that, and that's what we want.
Right. So you spoke about women in leadership positions, but we know Sri Lanka is traditionally a patriarchal society, and that mindset change, making that change of a mindset in 22 million people is quite a tough ask for especially a political party. But with the National People's Power envisaging women to be more involved in the affairs of the state, how do you plan to convince especially the male voters that the women are in fact capable. And even sometimes women who believe that other women might not be capable of executing a certain task. So where do you include that mindset change in your policies to ensure that there is proper parity when it comes to governing the state and having a very significant proportion of women being in power?
So if you look at, I think that's generally a prejudice against women that they are not capable. I think women are very capable. So if you look at the economic crisis happening in the country right now, women are managing at the household level, right? So there's extreme poverty in the country. Cost of living has gone up. Electricity prices are going up, energy prices are going up. So, but women are managing this. Women are being very efficient in keeping their families together. Adapting, right? And if you look at the migration levels going up, this is women taking responsibility for their families, for the country, for the economy, right? So it's not right to say that women are not capable. Women are very capable. The only difference is the kind of prejudices that you have against women and how that translates into political campaigns, right? So what we do is we make women visible. I don't think you need to train women into leadership. I think they're already very good leaders,
naturally leaders in their households.
Yeah, they're very good managers. What we need to do is to make them visible, give them the platform. That's what they need, right? So, and it's not easy. Like if you look at the attacks that NPP has been getting, just for promoting these women who are unlikely leaders. It's not just, I mean, when we talk about elite politics, it's not just for men, right? Even when you look at women, you have certain women with all the power and the resources to make themselves heard. And then you have certain other classes of women who don't have that access. So NPP is more focused on getting women who are, like I said, in the rural areas. So if you look at these NPP women's conferences, you can see thousands of women who are joining rallies, right? Maybe they're doing it for the first time, maybe they're doing it in a politically enlightened sense for the first time, and they want to make, women are coming to these rallies because at the heart of it, they want a change because they are the worst affected. They are the worst affected in the country. So they really want to change what's happening in the country. So that we give visibility to that, right? By giving visibility to that, we hope that more women will be inspired. It's not a very patronizing campaign of getting women and telling them what to do. I think it's more about enabling them, giving them a platform, opening up spaces so that whatever they do outside, they can do inside NPP. And I think it has been refreshingly revolutionary
Right.
for the party and for the, I think, for the women's movement in Sri Lanka. Because before I was NPP, I was, a very strong women's rights activist, and I believe it's refreshing to see
Right.
women who have not been in political discourse, who have not done political work probably, coming into that, right? Whether it's sticking up a poster, getting on the stage,
Right.
collecting,
There is a resurgence. There is a
resurgence,
Okay.
and I think everybody is noticing that, right? So if you look at, this is not just men talking to women, which is what's happening in most of the major political parties' Women's Day rallies. You not just Women's Day rallies, women's conferences, right? You have the party leader addressing the women. You have a bunch of men standing on the stage, which is not the case for NPP. We actually bring young women onto the stage to give their perspective, to get them heard, and it's not easy for them. They get attacked, they get bullied, cyberbullied,
Yes.
but they're still taking that stand. So I believe that's inspiring work, and I'm sure it will show in the
Right.
elections as well, how women can pick other women.
Right. So we were mostly focusing on a political angle in terms of empowering women. Let's talk of a more economic angle.
Okay.
Because in my line of work, apart from being in the media, involves livelihood development, and I'm currently working on a project which supports female entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka. And as a result of COVID-19 and the economic crisis that followed, MSMEs were the most affected, and they continue to be affected to this day. But women have still prevailed. They have adopted, like we agreed on, and they have carried forward their ventures, especially the particular women I know, the female entrepreneurs. But how will an MPP government, or the National People's Power government, support women in the economic arena? Women who have small ventures, who have small businesses, micro, small and medium scale enterprises, to take their businesses to the next level and to even have access to the international market, so that they can contribute greatly to the economy than they are contributing right now.
So I think one of the main tasks that NPP has is leveling the playground,
Okay.
right? Especially for people who are in businesses, because what we have right now is few people with a lot of political connections getting the business. That's what's happening in Sri Lanka. The state, the nexus between the state and the business class is very close. And if you look at these businesses, they are huge businesses. They're controlled by a few people, not women, right? Like you said, women are mostly in small and medium enterprises. So creating that oligarchies, creating that monopolies are actually putting a lot of other people out of business, right? So if you look at the economic crisis, and COVID was, of course, what can we say? It's a natural disaster, right? So we can't really blame anybody for what happened with COVID, but the economic crisis was a man-made disaster. And the responses the government had given to the economic crisis, from raising the interest rates and raising taxes on SMEs and inflation and all of that. So if you look at the policies that the government adopted to respond to the economic crisis, has actually crushed the SME sector. So it's not just COVID, it's not just the hyperinflation that we were facing, but even the answers to that hyperinflation and the crisis, the foreign exchange crisis, has not worked in favor of the SMEs where most women are involved, right?
Yes.
Not just in the sense of, I mean, if you look at the medium enterprises, that's true. But if you also look at the smaller household level enterprises, it's more so, right? Because they have lost their entire businesses when people who have been, producing from people who have household industries, enterprises, they have been affected by the high energy prices, water prices, people who operate in bakeries.
And then labor costs also increase.
Labor costs also rising because inflation is rising. So this sector is completely going under.
Yes.
So, and that was not a automatic or a natural consequence of what happened.
Okay.
That was a choice.
Okay.
Putting them under and saving a certain larger
Portion.
section of, no, not
Of
larger
organizations.
portion, more like larger businesses.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
That was definitely a choice.
Okay.
Right? Because we know that degrowth means bad for
So you're
businesses,
saying it was
especially.
mismanaged.
Definitely. The responses to the crisis, I'm not talking about what happened before the default. I'm talking about what happened after the
Yes.
default, from raising VAT to raising income taxes,
Electricity prices.
energy prices. So these are just things that Sri Lanka has the highest energy prices in South Asia. How are we going to compete with any of the other countries, right? Whether you're looking at a small apparel factory or whether you're looking at some small establishment trying to get a hold of the export market, you can't compete there, right? So they have been going under. And there are key policies that government knowingly, deliberately implemented, knowing that this was going to happen. Degrowth, shrinking the economy was a policy choice. And most of these sectors are going under because of that policy choice, right? So we believe in a growth economy. We think economy should grow.
Right.
We don't think that there should be deliberate
Construction of the economy.
Construction of the economy. We don't think degrowth is good for especially SMEs, right? And SMEs are essential for growth. So I think that's a connection that NPP has made. So we want to support growth-oriented policies instead of the austerity policies that this government has been implementing.
Right.
And I believe that will be good for women, especially the women in the informal sector. Women, 70% of the Sri Lankan labor force is in the informal sector, and most of these people are women, right? So it will be good for women. When you have growth policies, it will be good for women, right? And even if you look at the labor migration that's happening out of the country, it has been devastating for women because these are women who are in, if you look at certain sectors like the plantation sector, the apparel sector, some women and families were able to sustain their families inside Sri Lanka before the crisis, right? But since the crisis, labor migration has shot up. Why? Because they can't afford to live in the country.
Yes.
You can't educate your children. You can't give them a good life.
They need foreign revenue.
They need revenue, right? They have to go out of the country. And what does that do to a family? What does that? I mean, this is forced migration out of the country. It's a humanitarian crisis,
yes.
right? So I think if you can work inside the country, if you can work, this is not just for women. This is also for young people and men. If you look at what's happening to them, they have to go for precarious jobs. They have to move towards precarious types of labors. For example, I think very recently there was a spa rounded in Negombo, right?
Yes.
This is shooting up. People have to move to precarious types of work, and it's dangerous. Not just physically, but also like legally.
For society as a whole.
For society. Illegal employment, they have to get into, drug trafficking, all sorts of various illegal, precarious types of work. This has been happening in the country for a long time. And what is the government's response? Repression, police raids, yuktiya, whatever you call it. It's not working. This is an economic crisis. Crimes shooting up is a part of the economic crisis.
Because people are finding it difficult to live their lives on a daily basis.
Exactly. So economic policy that supports these, especially the informal sector, which has been getting hit for years, whether it was the Easter attack, then the COVID pandemic, then you have the economic crisis, now you have the government responding to the economic crisis, which has been equally bad for the informal sector and the SMEs in the informal sector.
Yes.
So what we want to do is to have policies which will support growth of this. So making credit accessible for them, right? When you increase the policy rates to, there was a time when it was like 25%, 29% in Sri Lanka. How can a business survive when the interest rate is so high, right? And this is coming right out after COVID. So we have to have credit accessible for certain businesses.
Yes.
Businesses that it's not done in a way that will encourage waste of credit, because credit is an asset, right? We need to make sure that we are channeling credit where it should be channeled.
To those who really need it.
And where it will be productive,
Yes.
where it will be useful to the entire national economy. So there will be, that is what NPP wants to do. NPP doesn't want to allow everybody to abuse certain facilities. We want to have a national industrial plan We want to know that money, the little money that we have, the little resources that we have is going to the right places where productive activity can be promoted, where it will benefit everybody in the country and not just into the pockets of a few people, right? Which is what's happening right now.
Certainly.
Whether it's the, I mean, when you look at the policy rate hike, people who already have a lot of money that they can lend to the government will make a lot of money. So people with money will double their money. People who are trying to take a loan to start a business or keep their business going are struggling.
Yes.
They have to go under, right? So there's a deliberate discrimination in the way the policies were implemented.
Right.
So we want to change that. We want to make sure that our policies are pro-growth. We want to make sure that our policies are not wasting resources, that it's done for a national interest, it's not done for vested private interest, that little money that we have, all the resources that we have are channeled in the right direction. So there'll be national growth, there'll be, you know, empowerment of all the people, and especially for women. When you level the playing field, when you give them credit, when you give them technology, when you give them skills, then they can compete with other businesses owned by men, maybe, we don't know, but you know, they can, it will equalize the
Right.
so when
certain resources might be subsidized for those who require it.
Exactly. So when you, I mean, this is strange because when you think of NPP, people would say, you know, equality almost becomes a stigma for NPP, right? Because it has roots in certain political tradition, socialist political tradition. So people
creating an egalitarian society.
Exactly, right? So equality is not just for, I mean, we don't look at equality in the spectrum.
Right.
Equality is also about women accessing credit that's given to men.
Yes.
Like if you look at SMEs, right? Because I'm professionally a lawyer, I know that, you know, how serious it is for a woman.
Yes.
I mean, it's not easy for a woman to be taken seriously, whether it's in politics or business, right? So women can't access bank loans, women can't access resources, they can't access market, right? So these are all controlled by a small group of people, I would say, right?
Primarily men.
Primarily men. So then it's good for women to have NPP because it levels the playing field, even though some policies might not be targeting women, right? But when you get rid of corruption, when you make the process transparent, when you increase accountability, people who are left out of the competition can now take part in the competition.
It opens up the playing field for more players.
Exactly.
So, unfortunately, it's a very engaging conversation, Lakmali, you and I had regarding primarily female empowerment in the political sphere, the economic sphere, and so on. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for the show today. Thank you very much for joining me and sharing your very valuable insights with me and as well as our viewers regarding the NPP's vision for basically empowering women and also ensuring gender parity in Sri Lanka. Once again, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, everyone.
And that is all the time we have for Face to Face tonight. Do take care and have yourselves a great Monday night.